Hello, welcome to another episode of Inside the Huddle. Today is Saturday, March 1st. This is episode 53 of the Inside the Huddle podcast. It is officially March, and the NFL offseason continues to roll on. NFL Combine has come and gone. Packed week. We'll dive into a lot of Combine stuff here a little bit later on, but we do have some breaking news just a little bit ago, about 25 minutes ago. Deebo Samuel traded to the Washington Commanders. Felt like this was coming for a while where San Fran would trade him. Just didn't know where that would be. We got that answer. We also got the answer on Matthew Stafford. Will he'll play in 2025? So that got shut down pretty quickly. The possibility of the Raiders and Giants taking him. He stays in LA. So we'll break that down as well. DiMari, another week. We've officially hit March. We're only about 11 days away from the new league year, free agency. Things are starting to ramp up here in the offseason after, of course, February, after the Super Bowl is a pretty slow couple weeks.
Yeah, and we talked about it, hoping that we would get some more news, but combine obviously going on, and a lot of news kind of quicker than we expected. Obviously, March 4th, that's when free agents can sign with teams that they've already been on this past season. But March 10th, free agents can agree to contract, can't sign them until, like you said, the 12th, the new league year. But it seems like it's going to start ramping up with some news here. Late Deebo breaking news, obviously. Stafford being announced earlier. So, we got a lot to talk about today.
Yeah, the NFL is never is a quiet time. Saturday night, you kind of just, expect to roll into this episode, talk a little Stafford, talk a little Combine, and then boom, NFL Schefter bomb. We get Deebo Samuel traded to the Washington Commanders. So that's what we'll start here. It's a very simple deal. Deebo to Washington, and they give up a 5th round pick. Look, I understand there's a lot of people that are going to look at Deebo Samuel and say, we'll break down what he can bring to the Commanders. But just to start first here, you could have got a little bit more than a 5th round pick in my eyes if you're San Francisco. I mean, you're talking about a guy that is still a dual threat, still a weapon. And I understand he's not the same player he was a couple years ago, especially, that 2021 season where he had the 1,400 yards and really broke out in what was a career year. I get he's not that same player, and especially last year was a pretty disappointing year for him, not just him, but San Francisco as a whole. But I feel like we had this conversation about Cooper Kupp when people were like, oh, we don't want to, take on that contract. He's washed. He's old. I think we got to stop acting like Deebo Samuel's 38 years old and is completely cooked. I mean, he still can play, and he now has an opportunity to go into an offense with Jaden Daniels, a team that's got some young pieces around him, and fit in as the number 2 alongside Terry McLaurin. I have no issue with this move for Washington. I think I think you could have got a little bit more than a 5th round pick.
Yeah, I think so too, but at the same time, I'm not too mad at it. Like I said, we both watched the receivers earlier today in the combine, and you see the talent that you can find anywhere from round 1 to maybe even round 7. So I kind of get why they did go ahead and deal them when they did, but I also do agree where a 5th round pick kind of almost seems like not in bad blood, but like let's wipe our hands clean, let's get you on out of here, and kind of start fresh. Look forward to the combine and see what we can bring in as your replacement. So from that side of it, I agree. But from the other side of it, again, 5th round pick, and it's just like you should have tried to get some more for him. Like you said, we know what Deebo brings. I mean, some say he's washed, others might not think so. My fantasy team surely did think so this past season, both of them. But he still has a lot in the tank, and we always talk about it every week. You go to a new place, new environment, you kind of up your game, and I think that's what we're going to get from Deebo. So it's not like, sorry, feeling under the weather, but not like a guy that's going to go and completely just stink it up and he's 38 and can't move. Deebo is still Deebo at the end of the day.
Yeah, 100%. This isn't like a Julio Jones going to the Eagles. I think we've made this comparison a couple of times, or even D-Hop this year, the Chiefs, where he kind of struggled, and whatever washed receiver you want to talk about going to another team. It makes sense for San Francisco or for Washington, and I guess yeah, it can make sense for San Francisco, like you mentioned, where they move on. And I think too, look at the combine, you look at the receiver class. It is a deep class. It's an intriguing class. Not only early rounds, but especially I think later rounds, like middle rounds of this class, because Luther Burden, Tet McMillan, Amika Ibuka, those type of guys, all are probably some of your top guys. You got the two receivers out of Texas as well. But we talked about this last week. Some of the deeper receiver class, Nick Nash being one of them. We discussed last week where maybe San Francisco potentially takes a chance on those guys. I also just think for San Fran, this is kind of the start of like trying to form a new core, if that makes sense, where they went to the Super Bowl twice, lost both times. Last year, you missed the playoffs. It feels like Deebo out. They did extend Ayuk, but it feels like maybe they're still looking to trade him, which I don't know why you're going to extend him. If you weren't willing to trade him last year, why are you going to extend and then trade him this year? That's not very smart from John Lynch and company over there. So we'll see how that plays out. But it feels like the start of a new core where they're moving on from some of these pieces that couldn't get the job done and try and get back on track. I guess from Washington, I mean, how much do you think feels this elevates them from where they were a year ago?
I honestly think it moves the needle, but I don't think it's enough to beat Philly when it comes down to it, or beat Detroit when it comes down to it. I don't think it's enough from that angle. And obviously, you still have the draft, you still got free agency that's going to open, so they will continue to make other moves. But from baseline looking into it, surface level, I think it elevates the offense a lot. Just because, I think we are getting away from this transition of the NFL where it's kind of like, all right, you need your big body jump ball receiver on the outside and need your small, fast slot guys. And that's how we're going to build the offense. So Terry obviously is not your big body outside guy. And many thought maybe that's what Washington would go after. And, there's been a few guys in the draft that we've spoke of that could have, fit that for Washington. But I think when you are kind of adapting to the new way of the NFL where, hey, you don't need your big guys outside. Let's go get some smaller guys that can run the route tree we can use in many different ways. Obviously, Terry can be used in different ways. Deebo is known as a gadget guy. So I think for them, that gives them the opportunity to use both guys in so many different ways. Opens up more things for like De'Ami Brown. So honestly, for Washington, I mean, I love it. But again, to beat Philly, to beat Detroit, they're going to need more. But just from surface level, I love the move. It's just how you can get better, and that's what they did.
Yeah, and I also think you just have to look at, of course, Jaden Daniels as well. You expect him only to improve coming off of Rookie of the Year, goes to the NFC title game, 25 touchdowns, 3,500 plus yards, goes on the road and wins 2 playoff games and gets, 1 game away from the Super Bowl. And I also think you just look at that run game too. I think more weapons at receiver. We'll see what they do with Ertz, but hopefully too can open up the run game a little bit more. Just Washington's offense as a whole coming up this season with Brian Robinson Jr. I thought he had a really good game against Detroit and had flashes throughout the regular season. But even too, just from a run game perspective, like if you tell me Washington now, Deebo McLaurin is your 1-2, complement each other well, and you get the run game going even a little bit more, which we saw flashes of. This is very dangerous offense that can only get better because you've got a good mix of some young talent and in some of that veteran talent. And we actually I guess we both sort of did, but I know I remember saying last year that they were like the 2018 Pro Bowl team. I criticized them for going after guys like Eckler and the name is slipping from me. Bobby
Wagner. It was
Wagner.
it was a lot of guys.
Yeah, Bobby Wagner. And I kind of criticized them a little bit for going after even Zach Ertz, going after all the old guys. But it really worked very well in their favor where they had a very good mix of old guys, some younger guys, some guys like Terry McLaurin, who I wouldn't necessarily say is like young. He's more, I guess, in his prime. Which is funny how we're talking about Deebo Samuel, but yet McLaurin got drafted the same year as Deebo. So it's kind of funny how that all works. But they got a nice balance on their roster, and I think Deebo adds to that. I don't know. I'm not the one on the boat to say Deebo is like completely washed and he's terrible. You're not asking him to be the number one. You're not asking him to do everything he was doing in San Francisco. And who knows? A change of scenery might be nice. Might be a positive for him. He spent 6 years in San Fran. This year didn't go well. The time kind of ran out. When you go to the Super Bowl and lose to the same team in the same fashion 2 times, you get to the NFC title game as well against the Philly and against the Rams, and you lose those games. It's eventually you have to shake up a core and time runs out, and that's what happens here. Any guys you like San Francisco perspective? CMC to Dallas now?
Absolutely. I'm hoping. I am hoping, but of course I'll go pick up CMC and drive him to Dallas if need. But and I know of course we are all fun and games and thinking about the impossible, but just the way that they could trade at Deebo and you possibly being able to be traded, you're kind of like, who is the untouchables? And I mean, again, you say you break up that core and you can't seem to win with it. At what point does they do consider McCaffrey? So we'll see, and everything has a price at the end of the day.
Yeah, that'll certainly be one way for Jerry Jones to win back some of the fan base if they do move on from CMC. I will say this about Ayuk. There's no way they trade him, right?
No, they can't. It would be the biggest just what went wrong, like front office wise, if they were to deal him.
And I'll be honest, John Lynch has done a great job building that roster for years now. Really, up until last season, we talked about them being one of the most talented teams in the NFL with Kittle, Deebo, Ayuk, Bosa, all these pieces, being able to just put in whatever quarterback you want in there, as CMC, of course, as well, and having success. But you talk about one of the biggest mishaps, extending Ayuk, then him going out, not playing well, then getting hurt, which is unfortunate. But even prior to the injury, wasn't playing well, didn't score a touchdown in the 7 games he played, and then trading him. Disaster. Then why didn't you just trade him last year? There are certain rumors that even if they don't affect my game, there are certain rumors that as an NFL fan, they just annoy you. Those are one of those rumors because it's just so dumb. It's just why is that even being talked about? Where you extend this guy when you could have traded him last year, and then now you extend him, and now we're going to trade him a year later. What?
And for his sake, he was the circulating name even before Deebo. We thought it was going to be Ayuk, and then Deebo would remain in San Fran. And those that paid close attention to it, you've seen the incident with the practice shorts where he didn't have the right shorts on, and it kind of seemed like this was a bad romance. Everything was kind of downhill, and he was going to find his way out. And the back and forth, I want to be traded. I don't want to be traded. We're going to trade him. We're not going to trade him. And then, like you said, he gets the extension. So then a year later, when he doesn't even give you half a season, you go ahead and you get rid of him. That's just malpractice in the front office.
Yeah. It's a bad look. Definitely a bad look. And I mean, if you do move on from Ayuk, let's say that does happen, and you've already moved on from Deebo, you're looking at probably drafting a guy and then hoping someone like a Ricky Pearsall can take a big step here in year 2. Because then you start to look at the receiving core, and it went from, 2 big names to some question marks. Juwan Jennings, who had a solid year. You want to bring it, have him back into the fold. Pearsall, a rookie, probably be their most realistic way to go about fixing that room in 2025. So we'll see what happens. And I'll also need to figure out the tackle as well. So they got some work to do. And I guess that work sort of started today. I don't know how much you're going to be able to get out of a 5th round pick, but
I mean, Well, again, with how deep
I guess only
this,
time will tell.
let's say it is a replacement with the wide receiver, with how deep this class is, they can find someone they can gel them right. But it's all about gelling that one player the
Yeah.
right way.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And look, you come into a good system. Shanahan's a great coach. So if there was a team that could do it, it would be San Fran to bring that guy in and then develop what's already on the roster. So I guess moving on, stay in the NFC West, stay with the West Coast here. We'll go to the Rams. After what, about two weeks, it feels like, about of conversations. I mean, it felt, after the season, you wondered Stafford's future with retiring, however that would all play out. He's staying with the Rams. So it feels like it was kind of anticlimactic 2 weeks of, I know in the New York market here, a lot of, Giants talk, Giants getting Stafford. That lasted about 2 weeks. He returns with the Rams on a new 2-year contract. I'm not really surprised this is the end of, or how this all ended. I think this was just the Rams being a smart organization where they basically told Stafford, they used the Raiders and the Giants. They told Stafford, go out, find what your value is, and then come back to us and we'll match it. And, we're going to keep you here. That's pretty much they did. And the Raiders and the Giants made every effort to get him, including the Raiders, where supposedly him and Brady were, that's been some crazy story in Montana. And then you had the Schultz and Ian Rappaport fight at Starbucks over the reporting on that news. So, the NFL offseason just off to a hot start. But Stafford returns, and I think this is good for the Rams. It didn't make a ton of sense to why they would want to move on from him or let him go. They're got some young pieces around him. He's still playing at a high level. We say it all the time here on the show. They were 10, 15 yards away from beating the Eagles in the snow. It makes sense for them. Makes sense for McVay. Keep him around. Continue to build the roster around him. So then whoever that future quarterback is, they come into a good situation. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think it was the right move to bring him back. I mean, you said it. He still is playing at a high level. If he'd have went out and looked like Aaron Rodgers this year, sorry to bring that back to you, but then it makes sense. Like, hey, let's get young. Let's start fresh. We have a young core around Kyron Williams, obviously Puka, and then you get rid of Cup and you get rid of Stafford. Like, that makes sense if he wasn't playing good ball. But again, you go on the road in Philly in the snow and you're a few yards, just one ball's kind of thrown too far on the outside away from beating Philly, who we're talking about, I mean, Super Bowl champions. That's a big deal. And, Stafford is a big part of that. And as great as Sean McVay has been, not taking nothing away from Sean McVay, that offense is Matthew Stafford. Like, to down to the T, it just fits him so well, and it works for both sides, especially with McVay and Stafford, how long they've been together. And we've seen guys elevate their games. Kyron Williams, Puka, obviously, that have played so well under Stafford. So to try to, get rid of that when you are a team that's constantly in the conversation, to get rid of that and then try to bring in a new guy to learn a whole new system, or let's say that it went with like Stetson Bennett, obviously not a Matthew Stafford, but if they want the option of bringing a new guy or a free agent, learn the system, get familiar with your teammates, it's just not ideal. So I think it was a good move and a very smart decision for both sides to kind of figure out a middle ground.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a good point too, is who would be their option in 2025? That's a big debate with a lot of teams, especially I know amongst the Jets where they moved on from Rodgers. A lot of people want to know who's the better option, the Rodgers. And that would be the same thing with the Rams is like, okay, you move on from Stafford, which doesn't make a ton of sense. Then who is your quarterback going to be? Who is going to be your better solution for Stafford? You're picking 26th in the draft. You're not going to draft somebody 26th overall. It's going to come in. You mentioned, Stetson Bennett is not going to, Jimmy Garoppolo. No. Neither of those guys are Matthew Stafford. Neither of those guys are really, I mean, Garoppolo's a backup. Stetson Bennett to what? What did he do? I think he threw 4 interceptions in a preseason game.
He still won that game though.
It still won. That was the Cowboys game.
That was the Cowboys game.
Yeah. Not to bring up bad memories, but Stetson Bennett's not the guy. Unless if you take a chance, a swing on a mid-round guy, which they still might. And if there was a GM out there to hit on a mid-round quarterback and find him and be the future piece, it would be Les Snead because he's hit on so many other mid-round pieces like Kyron Williams and Puka Nacua, who have been big pieces of that offense. But it just didn't make sense. Like, they're still a playoff team. Matthew Stafford's still playing a high level. You mentioned it. He's not like he's Aaron Rodgers. He could still move. He got this team to the playoffs. They got a winning culture there. There's no reason to kind of, if he wants to return, there's no reason really to have that break off for no reason. Like, it didn't make sense why it wouldn't have made any sense why the Rams would have ever let him go. Now, the teams that were interested in him, the Raiders and the Giants, are now put into an interesting spot. I guess we could start with the Giants just because they're in a very interesting spot where you're picking 3rd overall. The more and more you look at this draft class, the more and more Cam Ward is the consensus number 1. And it's even gone to a point now where some people believe that Shedeur Sanders might not even be the number 2. Rappaport spoke today that maybe a Jackson Dart or somebody like that might even be better than Shedeur. I don't know. Shedeur is interesting. Cam Ward is the consensus 1. I wouldn't necessarily say some of these other quarterbacks are better than Shedeur. Those are the top 2 guys. But if you're the Giants, do you want to put all your eggs in the Shedeur basket? We'll see what they do to pivot now if they trade up. They're in an interesting spot with Ward maybe going 1, and then if Shedeur goes 2 to Cleveland, however that all plays out. I guess, what do you think best plan of action for the Giants, which could include Rodgers?
I think you start. It's so tough. I mean, back to the Stafford thing, kind of obviously with Rodgers, but it's like you don't want to bring in a guy when everyone is so young, and then you bring in this old guy that just hasn't played well. And what I meant by that with tying it into Stafford is just like, again, you don't want to bring in a new guy with some guys that already know a system too well that's played together for a few seasons now. So same with the Giants. Like, you don't want to bring in Rodgers who hasn't played well at all. And I know it's a different situation. Obviously, not a playoff team. It's not like they have a great organization and great culture going. But if you want to build something, that's not going to be with Rodgers. I think you got to gamble. You got to go with Shedeur. I mean, I know he has his character concerns and his red flags and all those type of things. And some think he's kind of too Hollywood for, to be ready for the NFL. But at the end of the day, I mean, Shedeur, Cam Ward, Jackson Dart, whoever it is, it's one of those things where it's either going to work out or it's not going to work out. I know it's going to suck if you draft high and the guy that you were planning on building your franchise around doesn't work out. But at the end of the day, man, sometimes you have to take a gamble. And the Giants right now, we said this, I think, last week or the week before, they're already at rock bottom. It can't get that much worse. So, you better off just going after Shedeur and just hoping that he can, get media trained, I guess, and can just turn into what you hope he can be. But any other option, I mean, it's not looking too hot.
Yeah, you do make a good point. It can't get any worse, right? I mean, they went 3-14. There's no way they draft Shedeur and they go win 2 games. I think that the Giants are in such a difficult spot because they need to balance the fine line of building for the future, but also trying to win now, because Brian Daboll and Joe Shane have very little wiggle room. Like, they have to win this year. They have to be competitive this year. In a way, maybe they might have to make the playoffs this year in order to be back with the Giants in 2026, which is why, Giants fans and NFL people just in general will bring up the point of they should have just blown it up after this year. Shedeur is interesting. I don't know. The big market, the media, I know, Dion and the last name certainly would want that. And he mentioned today how he's a program. He could change programs from Jackson State to Colorado. He's definitely confident. I don't know. Shadur's just interesting. Like, there's not much with Shadur that you watch. He's a very low ceiling. Very low ceiling. Like, you watch his games, you watch him play. Like, there's legitimate stuff that you can look at and be really excited about. Shadur feels like a guy that can get to the NFL, have a good career, but I don't know if he'll ever be able to elevate you, especially in a division where you have Jaden Daniels and you have a team that just won the Super Bowl. I don't know if Shadur is ever going to be able to do that. Who knows? Cam Ward might not be able to do that either. But Cam Ward, the throws he can make, his mobility, his athleticism, and arm talent are legitimate things where you could say this guy can go to the next level. Shadur, it's kind of like he's not very mobile. He's pocket passer in a league that's changing into mobile quarterbacks, you know?
Yeah, I'm right with you. I mean, not trying to downplay Shador, neither one of us, but I see exactly what you're saying. Where, like, again, Cam Ward, the escapability and the almost like nonchalant presence in the pocket.
Yeah.
You kind of see a guy like that, and you're just like, all right, he's going to be special. Obviously, you can't get away with that in the league when you got DNs and whatnot running 4.4s and 4.5s. You know, it's a different pace of game, different speed of game. So he will get himself killed back there if he doesn't adjust his game to, the speed of the league. But with Shador, you kind of watch him, and you watch Colorado this past season or the year before that, and you're just like, those 423 yards, what was exciting about it? And we're not taking away from, okay, he made some big plays, he made some big throws. Not at all what we're saying, but you watch those games like, all right, 423, 4 touchdowns,
Yep.
like, there was no excitement around it. That excitement kind of came off the back of Travis Hunter or Jimmy Horn and those type of guys that made the plays exciting. So I definitely get where you're coming from. But again, with the Giants, all you can do is hope that you can bring in a guy that can elevate him. But you look at that roster, which I'm not even going to ramble about. That roster's terrible. That roster can't compete with Dallas. It can't compete with Philly. It can't compete with Washington. So, I mean, how much elevation can Shador and Malik Neighbors do, unless, of course, they're aggressive free agency?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. You make a good point with Cam Ward. I'm sorry, but you're going to get killed in the NFL if you stand still in the pocket.
Yeah.
You're going to get killed in the NFL. And maybe we're a little hard on both these prospects, a little too hard on them just because it's really the only two guys. Last year's draft class, we went from, tons of different, May, Daniels, Penix, Nix, so many different names and so many different quarterbacks. As to this year, it's really just two guys. So kind of gives you more opportunity to just dissect each of them. But yeah, it's an interesting spot. I mean, I think they'll go veteran and Shadur. I guess to get to the Rodgers point, like, look, he likes New York, which I don't really understand why. And it's not against New York itself. I just, from a Rodgers perspective, if I was Rodgers, and he bought a $9 million house 2 years ago when he got traded to the Jets in the New York, New Jersey area in Montclair, which is up by the stadium. And look, I mean, he can afford to sell that house, I'm sure. I mean, he's $9 million for some of these guys, but like, and I get that part, and I get he likes New York, and I know even on Hard Knocks, like he likes to go into the city a lot. But if I was Rodgers, like, after the way the last 2 years have went, my age at this point, number one, I would not want to play onto that. I would not want to play on that MetLife turf another year. And number two, like, I don't know. And maybe it's because he was in Green Bay for a while and he likes the big city, but I just don't know why he'd still want to stay in this market and stay here. But it feels like it's a legitimate. Rodgers still likes New York and would be interested, and it feels like the Giants have interest, according to Schefter. You feel like that's something that can actually happen?
I mean, again, this to your point of them being in such a tough situation, this is the problem. It's obviously, again, free agency starts on the 10th when you can agree to the contracts. So it's like, okay, are we going to sign Rodgers. Well, before I even get to that point, you're not drafting Cam Ward or Shador Sanders to sit behind anybody for a year. So it's like, are we drafting Rodgers and are we passing up on one of the two and then looking to 26, how we talked about off air with your Arch Mannings and your Drew Allers and those type of guys? Are you going to bank on that and Rodgers be your bridge, or are you going to pass on Rodgers and then you don't end up getting one of those guys for whatever reason, whatever happens? So it's such a tough situation. But I think for the Giants, again, I mean, you are not in a win now situation. You'll be lucky to win 6 games next year.
Yeah.
So go ahead, draft one of the two guys, pair them up with neighbors. You obviously have Tyrone Tracy as well, who was a rookie last season. So you have a very young core. And maybe one of those guys can get some more out of your Darius Slaytons, your Jalen Hyatts. Like, you have a young roster. I believe Theo Johnson. You have a very young roster. You have some young talent. You don't want to bring Rodgers in there for a year and it doesn't work out. And next year, no disrespect, but just throwing out a name. And now you're stuck with Drew Aller moving forward. And that's, what your hope for is 2026. You might as well just go all out and get one of your two guys.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see a world where they go and, like, if they do draft Shador, I guess I could still see a world where they go and get a veteran as well. I don't know if that'd sit. I don't know, though. Like, it feels like Shador is probably a week 1 guy. Like, if you're going to, I don't know. And maybe they sit him, but either way, the Rodgers thing's interesting just because if you're Brian Dable and Joe Shane, are you going to really want to hand the keys to Rodgers for, like, a year to decide your jobs, essentially? And I guess you'd have to see how willing Rodgers is to come in and not have as much control because he's not going to be able to bring in Nate Hack. He's not going to be able to bring in all of his buddies like he did with the Jets. I don't know. I guess, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to the Giants and goes and dominates because that's just the Jets' luck. Like, he'll leave the Jets and go dominate with the crosstown rival. But how would that whole dynamic too I feel like Dable and Rodgers, I don't know if that fit. Dable's kind of a hothead, big personality. Rodgers, same thing. Both guys want to run the things their way. That's why I've even said Tomlin and Rodgers, I don't see fitting. Tomlin's got a system there. He runs things his way. I don't think he's going to want somebody like Rodgers coming in there and almost telling him what to do.
In both situations, you're putting a fire out with newspaper. Like, it's just, it's not going to work. It's not going to work.
No, you're better off, I think, going after a lower end backup and then drafting a Shador lower end backup, compete. Shador wins and you roll with him. But then again, though, the Giants, they have to win. They have to be competitive this year. If you go out there and Shador 3 weeks in looks lost, they're getting fired. So they're not in a good position. They're in a terrible spot, in fact. They're in a really difficult spot. I guess Rodgers would come cheap, but that's about it. I just think the NFL is done with the whole Rodgers experiment. Like, we really going to run it back with Rodgers? We're going to get all the media hype. Rodgers, can he get, like, come on. The guy, well, let's be honest here for a second. The minute he lost to Detroit at home, the last week of the season to get eliminated from the playoffs in 2022, that right then and there was like the end of Aaron Rodgers. He never loses a game like that. That's when you knew, well, he has lost big games in the playoffs, but to get to the playoffs against a team like Detroit that he dominated, walking off the field with Randall Cobb, that should have been the end of it.
And so respectfully, right now, Rodgers, even this whole entire year, all the talk during this offseason that's going to go on until he does sign whatever, Aaron Rodgers is just a glorified Kirk Cousins at this point. I mean, they looked almost identical throughout the year, but no one's talking about where Kirk might land and hyping up Kirk Cousins' next move or whatever the case. It's only Aaron Rodgers who looked awful as well. But, that's the way the NFL goes. But I also agree with that experiment. It has to be just done.
Yeah. The NFL has moved on from Rodgers. That's what it feels like. But I guess only time will tell if that's actually the truth. And we will know pretty soon here with the way the quarterback market shapes out. I still think Russ has a pretty good shot of ending up with the Giants. Now, the Raiders, on the other hand, what do they do? That gets interesting. I feel like Darnold could be in play for the Raiders.
Yeah. I mean, Brady being there is going to influence a lot, so I can see
Yeah.
that.
Brady was on the other sideline, though, for the Ghost game, so maybe he holds back on that. But, yeah, the Stafford thing's big. It's the first big domino to fall, one of the first big dominoes to fall in the NFL from a quarterback market perspective. Now we wait and see, what are the other what happens to the rest of these teams, what happens to the rest of these quarterbacks, like the Raiders, Steelers, Jets, Giants. What do those teams do? Where does Darnold go? Where does Russ go? Kirk, you look at a guy like Fields, the draft as well. Do you see a team trade up? Which I guess we can move on to just general combine stuff now. I guess we could start, since we're on the topic, Cam Ward, talking about he hopes he can be one of the missing pieces for the Jets. Now, I will say this. Cam Ward's not going to stand up there and say, I don't want to go to the Jets, or trash on them. He's going to stand up there and say all the right things. It is still intriguing, though, when you hear something like that. I don't see it happening, personally. Keep it short and sweet, before I turn it over to you. I don't think it'll happen. I just think Darren Muji, Aaron Glenn, I don't know why their thought process and most people's thought process is just don't, like, why start the clock on your regime and your quarterback choice this year? Because if you trade up and get Cam Ward and give up a haul and mortgage some of your future to get to the number 1 pick, let's say, or number 2 pick, whatever, to get him, I mean, and he in 2 years is not playing well, they're out. So they already put themselves under immense pressure in 2025. Instead, they could kind of go draft a quarterback middle rounds, 2025 bridge, low pressure year, then 2026 go all in. But I continue to say this: if they love Cam Ward, go and do it.
I honestly think they should. I think they should. The NFL is just so what if, because now, to your point of, you don't want to trade away your future and you go get Cam Ward and it doesn't work out and all those possibilities, but you also don't want to not go get Cam Ward. It works out perfectly. You look terrible in the bridge. You draft Cade Klubnik next year, who looks just as awful, and now you are still in football depression for the next 3 to 4 years. So it's really just a what if. Everything is a what if. It's the possibility of what may or may not happen. But this is one of those guys, I think you go up and you go get him. And I mean, we're talking about pieces, and you got Garrett Wilson, you have Breece Hall, you have Braylon Allen. You have the pieces. And I know you said, obviously a guy's not going to stand up there and say, I don't want to go to the Jets. But for him to say they have a few pieces, I want to be a part of that, I think that's genuine. Because, any other guy's giving the basic generic, I'm just going to be happy wherever I go. Whoever takes me, I'm just going to be happy to play there. I think Cam Ward genuinely would not be upset about being a New York Jet, similar to how you're saying with Rodgers, the big market and everything that kind of goes into it. I think Cam Ward would love that, especially coming from Miami. So, I mean, if the Jets, if you kind of know, if you believe you are a piece away, and again, however you attack free agency, so you got Garrett Wilson, you got Breece, whatever other pieces you bring in, and now you bring in this young, exciting player and quarterback. Yeah, why not take the gamble and just live with the with the results? So I would not be mad at it.
Yeah, I mean they've been waiting a long. I mean they've been searching for this franchise quarterback forever. We haven't been able to find it, which is just ridiculous. And that's what I'll say. If they really feel like he is the guy and they like him a lot, and listen, Darren Muji is coming from a team and this is why I do think Jackson Dart's a realistic option for the Jets, because Muji's coming from a team in Denver where he saw them draft Bo Nix after months of him being projected to go middle rounds. He skyrockets up the draft boards. They get him at 12th overall. I could see that happening with Dart, where maybe even they trade back in. They'll take a quarterback in some capacity, but that's the thing. Like, you have to have faith in Muji in this front office, where a guy that just came over from Denver, saw them draft a rookie quarterback who was successful in year one. If they see, the right things out of Cam Ward to warrant a trade up, then you go and do it. You have to trust them, and you have to hope that, if they really feel like he's the generational talent, you do it because, you don't want to settle for you don't want to just do it just because, it's only year one. I don't think it'll happen, but I guess the other thought process too is they do have Garrett Wilson, they do have Breece Hall. I guess though, like the idea of bringing a quarterback where they do have other needs. I mean, they need help next to Garrett Wilson. They need help at tight end. I guess you could make the argument of bringing a quarterback when the roster is more complete, but Cam Ward, though, if he's that good, he can elevate those guys around him. We didn't look at the Commanders roster going into this year as elite. Daniels elevated them, so Engstrand could elevate Ward, just like Cliff Kingsbury was able to do with Daniels. So it's a crapshoot. The draft, the quarterbacks. Then you get into the whole debate: sit them, play them. Every year, it's like, oh, these guys should sit. And then you watch last year, and you see Jaden Daniels starts right away, has success. Bo Nix starts right away, have success. Then you see guys who don't sit right away, or sit and then have success, or don't sit then stink. Like, in my opinion, if you're good, you can play right away. Not many, other than maybe Bryce Young, there's not many recent examples, and I guess Drake may, but there's not many recent examples of guys starting. Well, Drake may, no, he sat right away, but guys like starting and then getting benched and playing well.
Yeah, no, Bryce Young. That's
It's
it.
really the only one recently. I mean, there's a lot of other older examples, but Zach Wilson got benched.
That's that's a little different though. That's a very different situation there with Zach.
Yeah. But I guess just combine stuff in general. What's your top 5 quarterbacks? Ward, Shedeur,
Ward,
Dart.
Shador, Dart.
Do you think there's any chance
Ewers.
Dart jumps Shedeur?
It's going to have to. The situation would have to be. Was this a movie? This was a movie. Have you ever seen the Draft Day movie?
I don't think so. Let me see.
Okay,
I've heard of it.
I don't
think I've
remember
heard
who
of it.
acts in it, but I know the
Yeah,
guy
I've
was
heard of it.
basically like head of the Cleveland Browns or whatever. So basically, in that movie, they were set in stone on taking one guy, a quarterback from Wisconsin. I can't remember who his name was in the movie, but ended up passing on him because they found out some like character issues behind the scenes. It's actually a pretty good movie. That's kind of the only way. And Shador already has the kind of character concerns. Obviously, movie reality, completely different thing. But unless they find something out just absolutely horrific about Shador and kind of his attitude and those type of things, I don't see Dart jumping.
It's a Kevin Costner movie.
Yes, yes, he does act in that. It's actually pretty decent.
I might have
But
to go watch it. But yeah,
top 5. I mean, yeah, we're gonna go Ward, we're gonna go Shador, we're gonna go Dart, we're gonna go Ewers, and I mean, after I had Gabriel up there, but after we talked about it off air, seeing him throw at the combine today, I might put Will Howard up there because Gabriel did not look good.
yeah, I like Will Howard. I like him a lot. Actually, some people feel like he's a day one starter, which I don't necessarily think, but there's a lot of, I don't know if it's because they won the national championship and stuff, but there's a lot of hype around Will Howard. It feels like
his
kind of a sleeper hype where whoever gets him, there's some people that really think he's going to be really good.
From the first like 7 games that I can remember until obviously the back end of the season, that was 2 completely different quarterbacks. Will Howard in the first 7 weeks would not have won the Natty. So I mean, I can understand it.
Yeah, he got better as the year went on. Yeah, I'd go Cam, Shedeur, Dart, throw Will Howard up there. I like Milrow. I think could really benefit from sitting. Like if
Yeah.
screams Anthony Richardson, but I think if Anthony Richardson sat right away, we might be in a different spot with the Colts. I don't know though. No, not really. I mean, he barely
I don't
played.
know.
Anthony Richardson's just not good.
I mean, I don't know. Even watching Richardson at Florida, there was nothing that was just like, wow, ready to be a starter in the NFL. It was just a athletic guy, big body, can throw the ball decent. We
Yeah.
can gel.
Yeah. That feels like Milrow. But I don't mind him. I'm probably higher on him than most. Dylan Gabriel I actually liked going into the combine, but God, I could have thrown better than him today.
Yeah, he stunk it up.
Riley Leonard is not intriguing.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't move the needle. Quinn Ewers, I like.
Remember, his
Last year
downfall,
though, a little bit.
his downfall coming into the year, he was definitely top 3, projected guy, and just it got ugly during the season. But he was injured, and I think that oblique had a lot to do with it. So that's a tough one.
Yeah. Kyle McCord.
Honestly, this is gonna sound crazy. I think his year was very slept on. Kyle McCord, what he
Yeah.
did at Syracuse, they had a very, very good year. I don't know. I feel like the way it ended at Ohio State, and then for him to come over to Syracuse, and then Ohio State wins the Natty immediately after he leaves, kind of leaves a
Yeah.
bad taste in the mouth of some. But I mean, McCord had a very good year.
Yeah. I like McCord. Jet fan growing up. So Syracuse Jet fan. Throw him out there. Anyway, I guess just combine in general here. Talk a little about the quarterbacks, but combine in general. What were some guys that stood out to you? You can break down position by position. Obviously, receivers, quarterbacks today. Matthew Golden, Texas. 2 receivers come out of Texas that are certainly first potential first round talents. Golden had a good 40 time, 4.29. I mean, what Isaiah Bond said he was gonna run a 4.2 and won a 4.39, right? So
Yeah,
not a great day
439.
for him, but any receivers you liked or any other guys stood out?
Oh yeah, there's actually 2. One of them you mentioned last week was Jalen Noel from Iowa State,
Yep.
4.3940 today. And for those who have actually both Iowa State guys, him and Higgins, who I mentioned after you
Higgins had a
mentioned
good day.
Noel, both had great days. But one guy that I watched all year that honestly I would love him paired next to CD Lamb is Trey Harris, who I believe measured at was it 6'4". I was not expecting a 4.5 240 from him, but if you watch Trey Harris this year, that is Mr. Consistent. He can run the route tree, he can use his body, big hands. The speed that I seen, and obviously game speed is a lot faster than in shorts. So don't let in shorts fool you, whether that's throwing the ball or running. But Trey Harris is very impressive. So I mean, there's a list. I mean, I can pull out a scroll of guys to talk about, but just some of the few Chimere, DK as well out of Florida. This class is deep. It's very deep. You cannot miss on a receiver in this class.
No. Only the Jets probably could because they always miss on receivers in the middle rounds.
Dallas too. We usually don't hit too well on that.
Yeah. But I like Trey Harris too. Out of Ole Miss, very consistent in his time there. Like you just look at even just watching his numbers, very consistent. You know what you're gonna get out of him. Was very reliable. Um, feels like nothing like elite traits, but you know what you're gonna get.
Yeah.
In a way, safe pick. I like Trey Harris too. Deep class, as you mentioned. Higgins was a guy you just brought up as well. Jalen Noel is another one. Couple really solid Iowa State guys this year. You got
Very.
2 receivers, Darian Porter, who had a fast 40 time. I think he was like third. Ran a 4.3 or a 4.3. So he had a fast 40 time as well. So some Iowa State guys really stood out. A guy that stood out to me, not receiver, but just in general was Eman out of South Carolina. A name I've looked at a little bit with the Jets just because they need some safety help. But he had a very good combine. Look at his RAS score. He was up in the top percentile on pretty much everything. The safety class is pretty good. He's probably rising up. He was probably more of a late first, early second. Now maybe you look at a mid first for him. So Doughty drops to the second. Really, probably the third. Might be the second. I mean, you look at the top three safeties in this draft. It's probably Malachi Starks, of course, is leading the way out of Georgia. But then Xavier Watts, I like a lot out of Notre Dame. And then Nicky Manwari as well out of South Carolina is another name to look for. Jonas Sanker out of Virginia, I like. Billy Bowman Jr. out of Oklahoma is a name to watch. Achille Arnold, USC. Third, fourth round guy. Middle round, Dean Clark out of Fresno State. Elijah Clark, Syracuse. Couple guys that I've just looked through and mocked to the Jets. But, yeah, impressive combine for him. And Shamar Stewart. Did you see some of his highlights?
Unfortunately, I watched a lot of Shamar Stewart being a Florida fan, just completely wrecked that offensive line. But yeah,
he had a very impressive combine. I think what Stewart is, he's an athletic freak. The production didn't really come at Texas A&M, but you feel like get to the NFL, get into the right scheme, the production can come. I mean, he only had 1.5 sacks in his first 3 years, all 3 years combined, or all 3 years he had 1.5 sacks in each of those seasons. But I mean, he's an athletic freak. Great. I was reading some numbers. I'll actually throw it up on the screen here. This was his RAS score in the elite in pretty much everything was a 9.99 out of 10. And I know the RAS scores aren't everything, but it's still something to look for. And I have to throw this up. Not saying he's gonna be Myles Garrett, but 2 Texas A&M edge rushers, very similar verticals and broad jumps. So something to look for.
Something about them SEC DNs, even James Pierce out of Tennessee,
Tennessee
6'5", 245, ran a 4.4. That is.
Yeah,
I mean, Cam Ward, if that's running at you, it's no way you're standing in the pocket, just standing still. But those two together, I mean, it kind of makes you think, and I know I'm reaching here, but you'll see where I'm coming from, where you're Cleveland, and you're just like, we can get rid of Myles Garrett because we can replace Myles Garrett with one of those two guys who are very similar. Obviously, Pierce more production than Stewart, and we're forgetting Abdul Carter that didn't participate because of injury. So, like, you have some very good guys to kind of replace Garrett, or for some other teams, Dallas, that DeMarcus Lawrence is probably out the door. You need another piece aside Parsons. You go get one of those, let's say a James Pierce, you're not landing the other two. You can definitely find some gems from, this DN class. So it's just, if you're smart enough to go get it, or if not, you're going to be upset. You're playing them 2 times a year.
Yeah. Definitely. He's an athletic freak. I don't know. I don't know what to expect from him in the NFL, but he's a name that you have to keep your eye on. Mike Green too from Marshall. Seen him a lot to Dallas.
I wouldn't be mad at it. I would not at all.
Talk about production. He was very good at Marshall. I think like 14.5 sacks or something last year. 17 sacks. He was up there.
If he played I know we used this last week. I can't remember with who, but if he played at a bigger school, he would. Yeah. He'd definitely be considered maybe top 15 guy.
Yeah. If he played at a Tennessee, played at a Texas A&M, even Mike Kyle Williams played at like a Georgia.
Yeah.
We'd be talking about him as maybe that's a little too crazy, but he would maybe be in the bubble or just outside the bubble with you and Abdul Carter if
I
he was
agree.
putting up this production at in SEC,
Yeah.
Big Ten, whatever. Um,
Yeah.
the edge class is interesting. It's a good class.
Very. It's that you can find a lot of gems. I mean, I'm gonna throw another one out. Landon Jackson, who's another one that's out of Arkansas. That's not
Yeah.
like on film completely just popped out at you. It was just like amazing. But you look at his intangibles and his measurements, and you watch his drills on the field, and you're just like, hold on, like he can probably in the right system, he can probably be very impactful. So this edge class is very intriguing.
Yeah. Braden Swinson, too, from LSU, is another one. I thought last year, just watching some small samples of just his film, like run game wise, I mean, his pass rushing ability, of course, is a big strength. I thought run game wise last year, he got a little bit better. He was above average, something he struggled with a little bit more at LSU. I feel like his first couple years last year started to get better with that against the run. Still kind of an average run stopper, but another guy with some athletic traits that you take a mid round pick on him could be a name to look for out of LSU. I believe he played 3 years at Oregon, I think, and then 2 years at LSU. I believe 5 years total, I think it was. He took off last year though from a pass rushing perspective. 8.5 sacks, which is a career high. About Jack Sawyer.
I think, yeah, let's see. I think, hear me out. I think he's one of those. Oh, 1 sec. Sorry about that. That
Oh, you're good.
I think he's one of those guys where what he does in drills is not going to pop out at you, but you watch him obviously in the game against Texas, and you just watch him throughout the year where he's just a dog, and I think he can kind of fit anywhere. There's just I can't think who it is. It's a comparison I have for him in the NFL right now. I'm gonna go with Alex Anzalone. That's not the guy I wanted to say, but one of those guys where energy guy and just Van Ginkel. There we go, Andrew Van Ginkel. Where it's just like he's not super athletic, and he's not gonna do a lot of things in drills that we've seen in the combine that is gonna catch your eye. But when he's on the field, it's just like wow,
Yeah.
he's a dog. He brings it. And I think he's one of those ones.
Yeah. Obviously had a very big playoff run. Certainly caught a lot of eyes there in the college football playoff. Any other positions?
Jahad Campbell, and linebacker out of
Yeah.
Alabama, is one that been paying a lot of attention to, not only because I love to use him on college football 25,
Yeah.
but also just another one of those ones. He's a dog, ran a 4.5 40. So, he can move. And I think you can't go wrong with a linebacker from Alabama. So that's kind of another one. These are just some guys I'm thinking for Dallas, but Campbell definitely, I think, will be very impactful if, again, right system. And I just have dreams of him and DeMarvion Overshown just as our two linebackers. Just one can dream.
Yeah. Jalen Walker, another one.
Yeah.
Campbell's picking up a lot of steam, though. It felt like he was, for a little bit, maybe like a late first, early second. Feels like he's definitely mid to early first.
Yeah.
Now.
It's all about, I mean, it's just how the cookie crumbles. If I don't think a lot of teams are going to make it first priority to kind of go out and draft him, but it's going to be one of
Yeah.
those. If he's the best available on the board, you go out and get him.
Yeah. And it obviously fits a need. The tight ends class, I think, is actually I like Harold Fannin Jr., middle round pick, receiving guy. Terrence Ferguson from Oregon, more of your blocking tight end. Elijah Arroyo from Miami had a big year this year. Gunnar Helm from Texas, Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame, also kind of similar to Terrence Ferguson, more of like your blocking type tight end. There's a pretty good mix though of like even Jackson Hall's from Georgia Tech, probably maybe a day 3 guy, but is a very good blocker. And for teams that kind of run that system where they run a lot of 12 personnel, relied on their tight ends a lot and run in pass protection, like Jackson Hall's, Mitchell Evans, Terrence Ferguson, guys that can produce. I like Ferguson a lot in the middle rounds. Mason Taylor, too, from LSU. Warren's obviously the biggest one. And then Colston Loveland from Michigan. Maybe 2 tight ends off the board in first.
This is probably going to be a hot take, but I think as far as pure receiving, I think Harold Fanning is the best tight end, but that 40 time absolutely just derailed him. That 40 time was bad. He doesn't look like that on film though, but I think it's Warren, I think it's Loveland, I think you go Fanning, and it's kind of everybody else. But again, it's one of those classes where the names might not be the biggest, but they can definitely find some impact, the right system. Again, a team that runs a lot of 12 personnel. I mean, we see with Kansas City, they have 47 tight ends. They use all of them, and they all work out. So it just really depends on the fit and where they land.
Yeah, Fannin. I feel like Fannin Jr. could be another guy, too. If he went to a bigger school, we'd be talking about him a lot more. I mean, he put up 1,500 yards last year.
Like,
that's
insane.
Crazy.
That's what I think. He's the best receiving tight end. And I mean,
yeah,
if we're talking about this guy doing that and he's running in quicksand, I mean, imagine him
4.7.
with just, imagine him with a little bit more speed. If we can get down to like a 4.6, late 4.5, we'll probably be talking about him over Warren.
Yeah. Yeah. If he was a little bit more 4.7's a bad look.
But he's a tight end, though. I mean, we don't need.
Yeah, it'd be different if like, Isaiah Bond went out there and said he was going to run a 4.2 and then ran a 4.7.
Exactly, and I mean, also at the same time, every tight end you get, he's not going to be your Jonnu Smith or your Travis Kelce's or the guys that can catch and run. There's Jason Wittens of the world that did have very great careers. We have Dalton Schultz of the world right now still playing, who they aren't your catch and run type of guys. They are your, hey, I'm going to get to the sticks, I'm going to catch this ball, and I'm going to get down. And I mean, Fanning could fit that, but 1,500 yards does not need to be overlooked.
No, it can't be. And 10 touchdowns, I think it was. Massive threat in the receiving game. And it'll be it just all what teams value. Do they value that more blocking tight end? Do they value more that receiving tight end? It's all what they value. Fannin Jr. I like a lot in the middle rounds. He finished first actually last 2 years in tight end PFF grade.
And no one has heard about him unless you really know ball, because he plays at Bowling Green.
Yeah, Bowling Green. He put up 200 receiving yards in the 68 Ventures Bowl against Arkansas State.
I think, if I'm correct, I think there was a game against Penn State they had this year where he torched, I believe, absolutely torched Penn State. So he can, he can play against the big program. It's just that 4.7.
He's just stuck in the MAC and the 4.7. He had a big game too against Texas A&M.
Yeah, that's the other one I missed. Like, it's not like he, was playing these smaller schools and was killing them. I mean, he went to A&M and Penn State and had huge games.
Yeah. I think I've just talked myself into Harold Fannin Jr. being like the number 2 tight end in this class.
No, this is, I kind of knew about him last year, not to the extent, but I have this guy I work with. Unfortunately, he's a Browns fan. God. Yeah, so he's a Browns fan. He's from Cleveland, and he loves everything.
That statement.
Well, it gets worse. All he loves is MAC football, Toledo and Akron and Bowling Green, everything just MAC. So, he knows I do the writing and whatnot. So it's like, hey, look into Harold Fanning for me one day. And I did. And I was just like, whoa, this guy is actually insane. And so now he's hoping Harold Fanning stays in brown and orange, terrible color scheme, by the way. hoping that Harold Fanning stays in brown and orange and makes his way to Cleveland. But Harold Fanning is tight end 2 is not crazy.
No, definitely not. Especially after talking about it a little bit more. All right. Any other thoughts?
Combine ends tomorrow with the offensive lineman, but other than that, I'm kind of just excited to see what March 4th has for us with free agents being able to kind of sign in-house. And that's it. We'll get some more news throughout the week.
Yep, definitely. Free agency right around the corner. See if we get any other trades. I feel like it's going to be a while till we get like Myles Garrett.
Well, I've seen reports of Philly are going to go out. If I can't live this life if Philly gets Myles Garrett, but we'll see.
What if Philly gets Garrett, but that means you guys get CMC, but that means Philly gets Garrett?
I'll take it.
You take that swap?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah, I probably would too if I was in that spot. Myles Garrett, though. Jeez. Yeah,
rich get richer.
Yep. Anyway, that'll do it. We'll be back next week. Thank you as always, and talk to you soon.